They laughed when I chose the janitor over the CEO's son, called me stupid for picking love in worn-out work boots over money in designer shoes. But that night, when a fleet of black cars pulled up to my tiny apartment, I realized I didn't know my boyfriend at all. Hey everyone, I'm Tasha, and before we dive into this crazy journey, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me, would you choose love over money? Stick around, because this story gets wild, and trust me, you won't see the ending coming. So let me take you back to where it all started. I'm 24 years old, born and raised in the foster care system. Never knew my real parents, bounced around from house to house until I aged out at 18 with nothing but a high school diploma and a garbage bag full of clothes. No safety net, no family to fall back on. Just me against the world. I'd been working double shifts as a waitress at this upscale restaurant in Manhattan for 3 years, serving people who spent more on one meal than I made in a week. My studio apartment in the Bronx was so small you could cook, sleep, and shower without taking more than 5 steps. But it was mine, and I was proud of it. That restaurant is where I met both of them. Brandon Cole walked in like he owned the place. Well, technically his father owned half the restaurants in the city, so he kind of did. Designer suits, gold watch that probably cost more than my yearly rent, and that confidence that comes from never hearing the word no in your entire life. He started coming in every week, always requesting my section, leaving $100 tips on $50 meals. At first I thought he was just generous. Then he asked me out. I politely declined. He asked again. And again. For months, this man pursued me like I was some kind of prize to be won. Then there was Isaiah. He came in late one Tuesday night, right before closing. I was exhausted, my feet were killing me, and I was ready to go home. He walked in wearing a navy blue janitor's uniform with his name stitched on the pocket, work boots that had seen better days, and an apologetic smile. "I know you're about to close," he said, his voice deep and warm. "Long shift. Just need something quick, if that's okay." Something about his kindness made me smile. I brought him our meatloaf special and we started talking. He worked as a janitor at some office building nearby, night shifts mostly. He tipped me $20 on a $15 meal, and when I told him that was too much, he just smiled and said, "You earned it." Isaiah started coming in regularly after that, always polite, always kind, always treated me like I mattered. We'd talk during my breaks, about books, about life, about dreams. He had this way of really listening, you know, like every word I said was important. Meanwhile, Brandon kept escalating. He sent flowers to the restaurant, expensive jewelry that I always returned. He even showed up once with keys to a luxury apartment, saying it could be mine if I just gave him a chance. My coworker Trina thought I was out of my mind. "Girl, you seriously turning down a millionaire for a janitor?" she'd say, shaking her head. "Brandon could change your whole life." But when I looked at Brandon, all I saw was someone who thought everything could be bought. When I looked at Isaiah, I saw someone who saw me. The night I had to choose between them was surreal. Brandon showed up at the restaurant with this elaborate proposal. Not marriage, just dating. He had a violinist, roses, and an envelope with 2 first-class tickets to Paris. "1 week, all expenses paid," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Just give me a chance to show you the life you deserve." The entire restaurant went quiet. Everyone was watching. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. It was Isaiah. "Hey, I know you get off soon. Want to grab some takeout and have a picnic in the park? I found a spot with a perfect view of the city." I looked at Brandon with his designer everything and his expensive gesture. Then I looked at my phone with Isaiah's simple text message, and I knew. I chose Isaiah. I chose the picnic. Brandon's face went from confident to shocked to angry in about 3 seconds. "You're making a mistake," he said coldly. "A huge mistake. Maybe I was, but it was my mistake to make." Those next few months with Isaiah were the happiest of my life. We'd have these simple dates, picnics, long walks, cooking dinner together in my tiny apartment. He'd show up after his night shifts, still in his uniform, and we'd watch old movies until the sun came up. But I started noticing things, little things that didn't quite add up. His vocabulary was extensive. He'd use words that seemed beyond what you'd expect. One night at a French restaurant, the waiter spoke French, and Isaiah responded fluently. When I asked about it, he just shrugged and said he'd taken classes years ago. Then there was the time I got really sick. Bronchitis, couldn't work for 2 weeks, and my rent was due. I was panicking, trying to figure out how I'd survive. Isaiah came over with soup and medicine, and when he left, I found an envelope with enough cash to cover my rent and bills. When I called him crying, asking why, he just said, "I've been saving for a long time." Let me help you. For a janitor, he seemed to have a lot saved up. His shoes were always immaculate despite his job. His watch looked expensive up close. He knew about art, classical music, business strategy. We'd have these deep conversations that left me wondering how someone so intelligent ended up cleaning floors for a living. Whenever I asked about his family, he'd get quiet. "We're estranged," was all he'd say. "It's complicated." Then everything fell apart. Brandon didn't take rejection well. He started spreading rumors at the restaurant, telling people I was sleeping with Isaiah for money, which was insane since Isaiah barely had any. But Brandon's father owned the restaurant, and one day my manager called me in. "We're letting you go," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Brandon's father thinks it's best." I knew exactly what that meant. I'd been fired for rejecting the boss's son. I was devastated. Rent was due in 2 weeks. I had maybe $300 to my name, and jobs weren't easy to find. Isaiah held me while I cried, promising we'd figure it out together. But I could see the guilt in his eyes, like he blamed himself. We started arguing about money. He wanted to help more, but I was too proud. "You're barely getting by yourself," I'd snap. "I can't take your savings." "Let me worry about that," he'd say back. Our first real fight ended with both of us in tears, and him almost saying something before stopping himself. "What?" I demanded. "Just tell me." But he just shook his head and held me close. I spent weeks looking for work with no luck. Bills were piling up, my landlord was threatening eviction, and I was running out of options. Then I got the call that changed everything. Kenya, my foster sister, really the closest thing to family I'd ever had, called me sobbing. Her 8-year-old daughter needed emergency surgery, a heart condition they'd just discovered, $75,000, and they needed it immediately. Kenya was a single mom working retail, no insurance that would cover it. I felt like the world was crushing me. I couldn't help her. I couldn't even help myself. That's when I did something I swore I'd never do. I called Brandon. He answered on the first ring, like he'd been waiting. "Well, well," he said, and I could hear the smugness in his voice. "Finally came to your senses?" I swallowed my pride and told him about Kenya's daughter. "I'll give you the money," he said immediately. "On one condition. You dump the janitor, publicly. I want you to humiliate him the way you humiliated me. Then you give me a real chance." I felt sick, but what choice did I have? A little girl's life was at stake. "I need time to think," I whispered. "You have 24 hours, Brandon said, and hung up. I sat in my apartment staring at the wall, feeling like I was drowning. Isaiah came over that evening and found me crying. I told him about Kenya's daughter, but not about Brandon's offer. He held me and promised everything would be okay. But how could it be? That night, after Isaiah left, Brandon called again. I answered, and we talked details. I didn't know Isaiah had come back. He'd forgotten his jacket. He stood in my doorway and heard everything. The look on his face broke me into a million pieces. "Tasha," he said quietly, and I spun around, phone still in my hand. "I can explain," I started, but he held up his hand. "You don't have to explain." "I understand." His voice was so sad, so broken. "You're doing what you have to do for someone you love." "I get it." He walked over, kissed my forehead, and left. I collapsed on the floor, sobbing. I just lost the only man who'd ever really loved me. I didn't hear from Isaiah for 2 days. Brandon kept calling, pressing me for an answer. Kenya called crying, saying they were running out of time. I was about to call Brandon back and agree to his terms when something impossible happened. It was 8 in the morning when I heard the commotion outside. I looked out my window and my heart stopped. There were 5 black luxury cars parked outside my building. Actual limousines. Men in black suits and earpieces stood on the sidewalk. My neighbors were outside taking pictures. I thought maybe some celebrity was visiting the building. Then Isaiah stepped out of the middle car, and I didn't recognize him. Same face, same warm eyes, but everything else was different. He wore a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. His presence had changed. Confident, commanding, powerful. He looked up at my window, and our eyes met. My hands were shaking as I buzzed him up. He knocked softly. I opened the door, and we just stared at each other for a long moment. "Can I come in?" he asked. I nodded, unable to speak. He walked into my tiny studio, and suddenly it felt even smaller with him and his security team in the hallway outside. "I need to tell you the truth," he started, his voice steady but emotional. "My name is Isaiah Emmanuel Washington. My family owns the Washington Empire, commercial real estate, hotels, investments. We're worth about $3 billion. I'm the sole heir." I sat down on my bed because my legs wouldn't hold me anymore. "What?" was all I could manage. He sat next to me, keeping a respectful distance. 5 years ago, my mother died. She spent her whole life never knowing if people loved her or loved our money. On her deathbed, she told me to find someone who'd love me when I had nothing. So I did something crazy. I started working undercover in our own properties, doing maintenance, janitorial work, surveying our buildings from the inside. That office building where I work? I own it. I own the whole block. My mind was spinning. The uniform? The late shifts? All of it was a lie? Not a lie, he said firmly. I really did that work. I really lived modestly. The only thing I lied about was why. And I lied because I needed to know if someone could love me, just me, without the money complicating everything. Then I met you. He reached for my hand and I let him take it. You chose me when you thought I was nobody. You defended me to your coworkers. You split your last $20 to buy us dinner when you thought I was broke. You loved me when you thought I had nothing to offer but myself. Tears were streaming down my face. "Kenya's daughter," I whispered. "Already taken care of," Isaiah said softly. "I paid for the surgery 3 days ago, anonymously. She's in recovery right now. Kenya doesn't know it was me." I started sobbing, from relief, from confusion, from being overwhelmed. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I was going to," he said, his own eyes wet. "I bought a ring 2 weeks ago. I was planning to propose next month and tell you everything, but then everything with Brandon happened, and you lost your job because of me, and I saw you suffering. I couldn't let you make a deal with Brandon out of desperation." Before I could respond, there was a commotion downstairs. We looked out the window to see Brandon getting out of his Mercedes, a smug smile on his face. He saw the limousines and his smile faltered, but he kept walking toward my building. Isaiah's jaw tightened. "Let him come up," he said quietly into his phone. 2 minutes later, Brandon knocked on my door. When I opened it and he saw Isaiah, his face went pale. "What's he doing here?" Brandon demanded. "This is your last chance, Tasha. Send him away." Isaiah stood up, and suddenly he wasn't the humble janitor Brandon had mocked. He was every inch the billionaire heir, and the power radiated off him. "Hello, Brandon," Isaiah said calmly. "I believe we met once at the restaurant. You called me the help and told me to clean up faster." Brandon's eyes widened as recognition and understanding dawned. You're Isaiah Washington? From the Washington Empire?" "The very same," Isaiah confirmed, "and I have some news. As of this morning, my company acquired your father's restaurant chain, all 16 locations. During our due diligence, we discovered some interesting financial irregularities. Embezzlement, actually. My lawyers are meeting with your father right now." Brandon's face went from pale to red. "You can't." "I can, and I did," Isaiah interrupted. "You got Tasha fired because she wouldn't date you. You tried to blackmail her into leaving me. You disrespected her, me, and every worker you've ever looked down on. Consider this a lesson. Be careful who you underestimate. That janitor you mocked? He signs your father's paychecks now." Brandon looked at me with pure hatred. You knew? No, I said honestly. I had no idea. He stormed out, and I could hear him yelling in the hallway. When we were alone again, Isaiah turned to me. His confidence from confronting Brandon faded, and he looked vulnerable again. I know this is a lot, he said. I know you're probably angry that I wasn't honest. So I'm giving you a choice. A real choice. He pulled out a folder. This is a check for $5 million. Take it, walk away, no strings attached, you never have to see me again. You can start fresh, live comfortably, help Kenya and anyone else you want to help. He set the folder on my table. Or, he continued, his voice breaking slightly, you can give me another chance. Not because I'm rich, not because I can provide for you, but because somewhere in these last few months, you fell in love with me the way I fell in love with you. I don't want you to stay because of what I have. I want you to stay because of who I am. I looked at him. Really looked at him. This man who'd worn a janitor's uniform and worked night shifts just to find real love. This man who'd listened to my dreams, held me when I cried, and treated me like I was precious when I had nothing to offer but myself. The money changed everything and nothing at the same time. You idiot, I said, and he looked startled. I chose you when I thought you cleaned toilets for a living. I chose you over a millionaire offering me Paris. I chose you when my coworker called me stupid. I chose you every single day. I walked over to him. I'm not leaving now just because you have money. I'm angry you lied, and we're going to have to work through that. But I didn't fall in love with your bank account, Isaiah. I fell in love with the man who brought me soup when I was sick, who remembered how I take my coffee, who looked at me like I was the most important person in the world. He pulled me into his arms, and we both cried. That was 6 months ago. We worked through the trust issues with a therapist. He introduced me to his world slowly, making sure I never felt overwhelmed. I started a nonprofit for foster kids aging out of the system, using his resources to create the support network I never had. We got engaged on a simple picnic in the same park where we had our first real date. No cameras, no spectacle, just us. I still live in my studio apartment sometimes because it reminds me where I came from. Isaiah understands. He'll show up in jeans and a t-shirt, and we'll cook dinner in my tiny kitchen like we used to. People ask me all the time if I feel like I won the lottery. I tell them no, I didn't win anything. I made a choice based on character, on kindness, on real connection. The fact that he turned out to be wealthy, that was just a plot twist I never saw coming. But here's what I learned through all of this. The right person will value you whether you're in a penthouse or a basement. Real love doesn't care about bank accounts. And sometimes the most valuable thing you can offer someone isn't money, it's seeing them for who they truly are. So that's my story, y'all. The janitor who swept me off my feet was literally sweeping his own floors. If this story touched you, smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment. What's the craziest plot twist that ever happened in your love life? Share this video with someone who needs to believe in real love. Until next time, remember, true love recognizes true love, no matter what costume it's wearing. Peace.